Today's date is April the 5th, 2017, and my name is Judith Jenkins. I'm a staff assistant with the Hanford branch of the Kings County Library. Would you please state your full name?
Graciela Tiscareno, Sato.
Very good. And we want to thank you for having time to come and give your interview with us.
My pleasure to be invited. Thank you.
Where are you originally from?
I was born half a mile north of the U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso, Texas.
Okay.
So I say it that way because I'm very aware of, like what if I was born half a mile south? And so I was born just this much into the country.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom and dad are from Mexico.
Okay.
And I grew up in Colorado. My dad is a tailor, and so we moved when I was about 2. So I grew up there, and all my siblings were born in Colorado.
Did you like growing up in Colorado?
I did. I'm such an outdoor girl, and it's because I grew up in Colorado. Yeah, very, very much an outdoor family. My mom was also from Mexico. She grew up on a farm, and so she was a mountain girl, and so we're always in the mountains and always in the rivers, and that's what I love today. So.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any of your siblings have they been did they serve in the military at all? Any other branches?
So I'm the oldest of 5 kids born
okay.
to my mom and dad who are Mexican immigrants. So I was actually the first to go into the military, which again is very unusual for a Mexican family. But hey, why do what everybody else is doing, right? But after that, my brother Marco joined the Navy, and so today he is a chief petty officer in the United States Navy, and he's also a combat veteran. He served in Iraq. The Gulf War Part 2. I was Part 1, he was Part 2. So he went in 2006, and thankfully he came back all in one piece. He's a combat medic. So he's in the Navy corpsman, but he deployed with the Marines. So he's the second one in our group of siblings to serve.
Oh, outstanding. What are the ages of your siblings?
What are the ages of my siblings?
Yeah.
Okay, so my sister is 48. Mm-hmm. My brother that I was just talking about mm-hmm. is 46. Mm-hmm. And then my youngest brother is 38.
Okay. No mm-hmm. sisters, just brothers.
One sister who's 48.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. What did you do before serving? Before you got to the military?
So it's an interesting story. How does a Mexican girl, daughter of immigrants, mm-hmm. end up in the Air Force? How does that even happen? Mm-hmm. Many times the recruiters come to the high school cafeteria and they set up tables, and the idea is that maybe you're trying to either escape low-income community or maybe a family situation, and so many times the recruiters are offering you a way out or whatever. Well, for me, when I saw them, I said, oh no, they're there to keep me from going to college, because I knew that if you joined the military, that means you weren't going to college. That's all I knew. I literally knew nothing. It's kind of embarrassing, but when I saw the recruiters, I thought, let me avoid them. So I would walk. If they're here in the cafeteria, I'd walk mm-hmm. around, mm-hmm. really never talk to them, because I knew that, I knew what I thought I knew. I'll say it that way. But I was really completely ignorant to the military. So when I wanted to go to college, I went to my counselor and I said, how do I go to college? We don't have money for that, but I want to go. Mm-hmm. And she said, come to my house for dinner. This is like when, God put somebody in your path to really guide you. And so her husband, she said, my husband had a large family like yours. Come to my house for dinner and he will tell you what he did. So I went to my high school counselor's house for dinner on a weekend, met her husband, who's an Air Force major, who had gone to college on an Air Force ROTC scholarship.
Wow. Reserve
Officer Training Corps scholarship. And so he told me, and he said, so any university that has an ROTC program, and or university that's near a university that has a program, mm-hmm. you just need to apply for the scholarship and then apply to a university, and you can use the scholarship anywhere that you can get in. Like, really? And it was 4 years. So he held my hand through the entire college application process and scholarship application process. So because of this one counselor and her husband, that's how I learned about the military. So what did I do before I served? As a high school kid, I had this amazing mentor because I kept asking questions.
Right.
And then I got the scholarship and I got the letter admitting me to UC Berkeley all in the same day. And this is when I was growing up in Colorado.
That's wonderful.
And so my mom cried. when the letters came in the mail.
Oh.
And it wasn't out of happiness. She was kind of in shock that I had just really found a way to leave.
Exactly.
But then I went straight into Berkeley, and so then I was a student there for 4.5 years, arrived as a scholarship cadet. The first year is try before you buy. So if you don't want to continue, if you do a whole year of training and you go, I don't really know if I want to do this, you can actually quit, and you don't have to pay back that first year of the scholarship. But for me, it was a leadership opportunity, and I loved it, and so I signed up. And when you sign up, you're committing to 4 years of service.
Okay.
And so I completed my college degree, and then I was commissioned atop the Campanile on the Berkeley campus. Mom and Dad put some bars on the side of my uniform, and I became an officer that day.
I know it's probably very exciting.
It was, and I'm going to reach over here and I'm going to show you a picture, actually.
Okay.
Because I want my parents to be part of the story.
All right.
So I just printed this out. Didn't have time to frame it, but here it is. This is commissioning day. Put that down. So this is Arturo and Tina Tiscareno, my parents, and they're each putting a bar on my uniform right here to turn me into a second lieutenant. It's actually really one of the happiest days of my life right there. And there's my mom and dad and my siblings.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, so I came in that way. Came in as a college graduate and ROTC scholarship cadet, and then straight in as a regular officer in the U.S. Air Force, and then into flight training.
So are there still programs like that to help people?
Absolutely.
Really?
And it's something that I'm very passionate about, communicating to kids as soon as possible. That's really what I'm doing down here in this area, is to serve elementary school kids and middle school kids. And my story is this is how I communicate it, and I tell them all about that. The Army has it, the Navy has ROTC, the Air Force has ROTC. So you can pick your service and you can go straight into college after high school, have the military pay for it, and serve afterwards as an officer. I think enough kids are never told this. So yes, they still have those programs, and of course they have the academies as well.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. Well, that's inspiring. So what inspired you to pick the Air Force program?
Well, honestly, it was the fact that I knew nothing about any of the services. I think actually in the cafeteria there were no Air Force people. They were all Army and Marines.
Oh, okay.
As I remember the colors of the uniforms. And so it was my high school counselor's husband, who was a major in the Air Force. He never mentioned the other services had scholarships. Didn't come up in conversation. So, a little Air Force bias there, and that's fine, because I was really looking for guidance. And if he was in the Air Force and he got the scholarship and he loved his career and he was willing to mentor me, I'm just going to follow what he's doing. So that's really how I chose the Air Force. It's almost like the Air Force chose me, is how I like to think of it. The way the universe happened, to intervene.
It's a good fit.
It is. It is. I loved it.
Well, can you expound a little bit on, once you finish your program, you got commissioned, what was military life about for you? What did you get out of it with your training?
Yeah. Well, the training, there's something worth mentioning here. My degree was architecture and environmental design, so at Berkeley. So I thought, again, in my total young kid ignorance, I thought I'll get an architecture and environmental design degree, and then I'll go into the military and I'll design buildings and bases and make them beautiful. The things you think that you know, right? And a second lieutenant at a base, because we do a lot of visiting of the bases, and so you kind of do some career shadowing. A lieutenant at Vandenberg Air Force Base in Southern California, when I was there for the summer after my sophomore year, I sat down with her. I'm in the civil engineering squadron, like, ooh, this is my future. And she says to me, so you think you're going to be building nice buildings and parks as part of the civil engineering squadron? Yeah. She's like, well, do you want to know what it's actually like? And so she says, you're going to be filling potholes for generals. Civil engineering is, hey, the pipe's broken here. Hey, the sprinkler's broken over there. Here, we need some potholes. She says, there's no designing. We don't do any of that stuff. And I said, what about the new hospital being built? Who designed that? Oh, well, they contract that out to civilian architecture firms. So here at the age of 19 and a half, I'm having my romanticized career completely shattered, thank God, by a lieutenant who was doing the work, who said, you don't want to do this. I said, well, I'm not changing my degree because I love my degree. She says, find something else to do, but I'm glad you're finding out now that it's not that. So that's the power of mentoring.
Okay.
And it has a lot to do with what I'm doing now is someone again stepped up and said, it's not what you think it is. And so instead of making the mistake of going into this track and being disappointed, she said, find something else to do. So that same summer, I got a flight at Williams Air Force Base as part of the summer field training. And guess what? I had a lady pilot that day, Captain Dolly DeLisa. I still remember her name. And she was flying the T-37, and I was in the T-37 with her, and we went up and flew. And everybody got a flight, including the boys who thought they wanted to be fighter pilots, and then they vomit, and then they go, maybe I don't want to be a fighter pilot. But that's the whole point, right? They're showing you what the career is. I could not get enough. She let me fly. We had so much fun. When we landed, she said, I had never been on an airplane in my life, except for when I was an 18-month-old baby. I don't remember that, but we had 5 kids. We didn't travel on airplanes, right? Which is, again, part of my story. Is you don't have to grow up knowing people who do it to pursue it, right? And so when we landed, she says, yeah, if you really love this, tell the staff when you go back and have them put your name in for the aviation boards, and you can either be selected to be a pilot or a navigator, but you can fly. And this was a week after the lieutenant told me, you don't want to be a civil engineer. So I'm like, connect some dots. So that's what happened. I actually went back and I said, I'd like to be considered for flying. And so that's how it happened that I went from scholarship to study, to do this field that I thought I was going to do, to suddenly here I am being offered a chance to fly. And so that continuum is pretty awesome. And it's speaking about putting yourself in a position to have opportunity come to you, right? And so I finished, I got commissioned, and then I went down the road to Sacramento to Mather Air Force Base for undergraduate navigation training. And what was that like? I was the only woman in the class of 25 people. Still very typically, there's very few women that are allowed to train per class. There's a lot of women that want to do it, but they're still keeping the numbers low per class, so we could talk about why that is. But I was the only one. So what was it like? Once you get there, once you're in flight training with all the other lieutenants, nobody cares that you're the only woman. I didn't care. I was supposed to be there. So I really enjoyed the academics. I really enjoyed the flying. I enjoyed the competitive nature of aviation training. And the camaraderie. I had a lot of fun. I met a lot of guys from all over the country, from places I'd never been. So I really enjoyed the training, and then crew training in the KC-135, because that's where I was assigned ultimately. Flight training finishes, and then they ask you which plane you want to track into. And I had to share this with you. This was March of 1991. This was about a year and a half before Congress lifted the combat exclusion for women. So I was in the top 15% of my class, and so you track by tracking your assignment. Basically, you ask for your assignment in the order of merit. First in the class goes up, second, like that. So I walked up, and you ask for your airplane and your base. So knowing that I was in the top few of my class, I walked up and I said, "Sir, I request the F-15E Strike Eagle to Luke Air Force Base, Arizona." And the room went quiet. And the colonel was then forced to say, "Lieutenant Tiscareno, you know that by law we cannot assign you a combat aircraft. What's your other choice?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I understand, but I want the record to show that I'm qualified for that assignment, and that is my first choice. And too bad for all of us that I don't get that assignment." So I'll take the KC-135 to Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington State, which is what I got. I got my assignment that I chose. But I did that to make a point, because then we watched a bunch of guys in my class who were ranked lower than me in the academics and the flying come up and get the combat jets. So I want that story in this interview, because how many women did we deny the opportunity to serve in our combat airplanes?
Exactly.
And we told ourselves we had the best of the best. We didn't really have the best of the best. We had the best of the best with one particular sex organ. We didn't really get the best of the best women. But about 16 months later, they lifted the combat exclusion, and I couldn't be happier, because then after that, all these women started getting assigned combat aircraft, because because they were graduating at the top of their classes. And wow, it happened really fast that women trained and then became commanders, and now they're everywhere as combat aviators. And so I was happy to be, early, but it was a bummer to be early too. But I really loved it. It was a wonderful airplane, the KC-135, the flying gas station in the sky. So it takes off, and we give gas to other airplanes anywhere in the world. And I was a navigator, so I was the mathematician. And I was the one that had to recompute the flight plan and had to redo the entire mission when there was weather, or if we were displaced for some other reason in a tactical scenario. If there's enemy aircraft over there, then we had to move over there. So I loved the rapid changing environment up in the air. So I really loved the assignment.
I'm loving it too. Wow. But, okay. Since your career is very, very busy and you're flying your own plane and you're also a commissioned officer, with all this going on in mind, did you have any leave time, and what did you do for leave?
Oh, well, see, this is wonderful. So, yes, it was very busy, and yes, we deployed a lot. And my first deployment was to Saudi Arabia, by the way. You're going to ask me later about the medals, right? So I'll say that. So leave. So here's what I would do. Here's my formula. So the day I got my wings at Mather, my boyfriend, who was a trombone player in the Cal Marching Band at Berkeley, proposed. Oh. He'd waited until the day that I finally had my assignment, had my wings, was done with my training, and then he asked me to marry him. So I mentioned that because we had made an agreement that we're going to wait at least 5 years to have kids. Because I'm flying, right? Sure. So why would you want to have kids right away? So what we would do is I would do an assignment over in England, for example, a particular example. And it was about 3 days before Thanksgiving that we were supposed to come back home. But I said, how about if I just take some leave and stay here? So I took some leave and I stayed in Europe, and then my husband flew over, and we had Thanksgiving with some friends in England. And then we saw some musicals, and we had a good time in London. And another year we did the same in Italy. So I took leave a lot outside the country. Or I would take leave, and our other favorite thing was to hop on space available the cargo planes going to Hawaii. So we would just jump on a plane at Travis Air Force Base, and 6 hours later get out of the plane at Hickam Air Force Base with our snorkeling gear. So we had a good time. I had a lot of fun, made leave a lot of fun, made my husband a part of it as much as possible. Another favorite was, I was assigned to the U.S. Embassy in Quito, Ecuador, in South America for a special assignment. And that happened because I was wearing aviator wings, and I'm totally fluent in Spanish. So this special assignment came down for embassy duty. So I'm like, I'm there. Never been to South America. So it was like a 4.5 month long assignment. And just like I had done before, when the assignment was finished, my husband flew down and we spent 2 weeks traveling in Peru. We went to Machu Picchu and explored that for several days. My college roommate flew down and joined us. And then we took a cruise, and then she flew home, and then my husband and I took a cruise out to the Galapagos Islands off the coast of Ecuador. And again, I tell you this, and I'm always just amazed that all these things even happened, because if you think about where I started, it's like how unlikely was any of that to happen. But that's what we did. We just had a lot of fun and traveled the world. So my leave was always about going somewhere else. Sometimes we stayed home in Washington State and fished and stuff, but usually I took leave to see the world and bring my husband over.
So you actually had, excuse me, you actually had the pick of everything then going for you. Once you made a decision to go ahead and join the military.
Yes, I was never susceptible to any of the advertising because, of everything I said before. So all those promises and advertising didn't ever register to me. But once I was there, absolutely. When an opportunity presents itself to go get a chance to fly, I jumped on it. When the opportunity presented itself to go work in South America for the embassy, I raised my hand and said I'd love to do that. Or when the opportunity presented itself to go work for NATO in Italy, I went and did that too. So every opportunity, including the leave, I I always had my eyes open, and I would just seize the moment. Because you only live once, right?
So, and that answers my next question, excuse me. I was going to ask you, if you had to do it all over again, would you do so?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because you sound like you enjoyed a lot of what you've done.
I did, and there was no regrets. I wouldn't change anything.
Okay.
And sometimes people ask me, well, your academic major at Berkeley, architecture and environmental design, had nothing to do with what you did professionally. I said, yes, but remember, that's my academic major. I was also full-time in the aerospace studies program as a scholarship cadet. So think of it as my second major. That was the professional Air Force and learning the profession of arms and how to be an officer, and then we had ground school to learn like basics to fly before going to fly. So that's like a whole other major. So I like to say that my Air Force aerospace studies led me to see the architecture that I studied, because it actually took me around the world.
Okay.
And so I put those two together, and so that's why I say I would do nothing differently, because it turned out amazingly to be able to study the art and the history and the architecture and all the creative stuff I got to do as an architecture major. Right brain, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, developing the left brain with the technical stuff and the aviation and the ground school and everything. And so I say at school assemblies, I'm like, put your hand on this side, of your brain. What is that? That's the creative. What's on this side? And they say math and, analytical. I said, okay, well, as long as you have two sides of your brain, please use them. And that's really how I feel about the entire military experience is, yes, it was technical, and yes, it was crew coordination and all that stuff in the plane, but I was always writing. I was always writing stories from somewhere in the world, sending it back to the base paper so that the base community could be aware of what we were doing since we were gone.
Okay.
The family is just that we're gone.
Right, right.
But we're like doing airlift missions, and we're bringing humanitarian relief into Somalia, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice if somebody told them?
Yes.
So the families would know what we're doing. So I kind of turned myself into the foreign correspondent in the squadron, and I would write articles back. So that's how I kept my creative going while I was in this very technical aviation role.
Okay. Okay. What are some of the stresses that you felt when going from step to step, the engineering and then going on to the aviation, and with so many things going at one time, what type of stress, or did you suffer much stress with all the rapid changes?
I wouldn't say that during the training I had stress. And I think that's just because of the competitive spirit that I've always had. I think I remember being 10 and being really into competing with usually boys and usually sports. So I thrive off of competition. So maybe that's a form of stress, am I going to get the best grade, or am I going to rise up in the rankings after this test or this flight? But I don't know if that's really a stress in how you're asking me. It was certainly a form of it, like academic and the training and that. But I think the biggest stress that I felt was, and this is important as a woman, okay, is there's all the officers' wives clubs. And there's the wives clubs and the wives clubs. Well, what about my husband? Is anybody going to invite him? Is he ostracized because his spouse is a woman? So my stress came from, is my husband being included while I'm gone? Is he being brought into the military family community the way that so many other family members were? And a lot of times it wasn't happening, and that caused me stress. Just thinking about, because we didn't have kids, and so he wasn't like running around with kids, right? He was like at his job, and then we had dogs. So I knew he was okay, but I just felt like I wish that they would include him more. So that was a cause of stress for me.
Right.
But, I think that the stress of the deployments and going to Saudi Arabia and enduring 120 degrees, of heat in the shade, and you get in the plane and like, okay, let's just all unzip our flight suits because it's ridiculous, like 160 inside the plane until you start the engines and everything, because like the plane's closed, right? And it's like cooking in the sun. So just that extreme heat of being over in Riyadh in August, that was like, I think I was always over there in the summer. So just like that, but I don't know, it was just manageable. It's, you just drink lots of water and stuff. But I think the stress, as I reflect, is the stress of how's my husband being treated back home, right? Which, if you're a male air crew member and your wife is home with the kids, you know that the community's all rallying around. But it didn't happen for him, so yeah. But I think that's the best way to answer the stress question.
Okay. Were you awarded medals and citations during your time when you were assigned with the Air Force? And can you give a little information about that?
Absolutely. So earlier when I mentioned that my first deployment was to Saudi Arabia, and that it was, that was shortly after I finished my training. So my first deployment to Saudi Arabia was immediately after the war ended, and it was Operation Southern Watch. So I'll answer your question this way. This is when we were patrolling southern Iraq to keep Saddam Hussein from launching his MiGs that he had at the time, Russian MiGs, and he was using them to kill his own population. So we had a no-fly zone set up in the north in Turkey, which I did later, but my first deployment was in the south. So we took off out of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, flew north, and we patrolled over Baghdad in southern Iraq. So he had his airplanes, and so he would launch the MiGs, and he would either try to shoot down our fighters or come after us, blind gas station. So the sorties were all deemed O1, which operational sorties, combat missions. So there's a medal called an air medal, which is awarded after, it's for meritorious aerial flight, and it's awarded for 25 missions or more when enemy fire is expected. So definitely a hostile situation. And so that's the highest, most prestigious medal. It's called the Air Medal, and it's right here.
Okay.
And so the story about that is, the flying was in August and September of 1992. So when we flew 37 missions, our colonel put the package into the Pentagon. You know, these 4 crews have all earned, have flown enough, and they have great safety records, and they've been able to do everything. So air medals. So you submit for a medal.
Right.
Well, the other 3 crews got their packages and their air medals. Our package came back saying that we cannot have an air medal because there's a female on the crew. And so how do you think that made the men on my crew feel? How do you think I felt?
It's got to be devastating, especially if you're doing the same, doing the same
Because
thing.
women can't be assigned combat missions because we can't. Well, the war had already happened and women had already been flying in the war, right? But they didn't have as many missions. I guess they hadn't had this air medal conversation because they flew a couple missions here and there. But we're stationed there flying continuously 2-3 missions a day. And so they actually tried to not give us an air medal. But thank goodness we had a colonel who said, no, this is ridiculous. They've done everything for the air medal. So he resubmitted the package. We went back home to Washington State, and then a few weeks later, we got our air medals. So that medal is really, really important to me. And I have the full medal in my little box at home. But it's topmost medal, most prestigious on there. And there's also this is the Southwest Asia Service Medal. This is for serving in Saudi Arabia multiple times. The Kuwaiti Liberation Medal, the NATO Medal. So definitely I was blessed with a lot of recognition because there was just a lot of operational missions that we did.
Exactly.
Air Force Commendation Medal and Achievement Medal. And another one I'm really proud of is the Community Service Medal for a lot of the community work I did while I was there. But I'm most proud of the Air Medal and the NATO Medal and the operational ones.
Well, clearly you've done everything that I would think that you needed to at least be recognized for that. I think that's very good. One other question.
Yeah.
While you were in service and going to these different places, whether it was for a mission or for pleasure, did you stay in contact with your friends or your family from back home?
Oh, yes, definitely. We would send postcards. It was the 90s, so people were starting to get email. So we definitely communicate with email. I actually have a whole collection now of letters that I sent to friends when I was deployed, who they held on to the letters all these years, and they've been cleaning up, and these shipped it back to me saying, hey, we think you want to have these letters for when you write your memoirs. So these letters that I wrote to my friends while I was deployed have now come back to me. So that's really cool because they
It
actually
is.
held on because, so, we don't get many Christmas cards from Saudi Arabia, so we held on to the card we got from you. So definitely,
Nice.
isn't that nice? So
That's very nice.
So they're coming back to me, and I started writing my memoirs when I was in the military, but, it's not the most important project. I'll get to that later, but it's nice to have those.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add to this? Because you have had a very exciting career, and hearing all the things that you've done, that you have been a very positive impact on your life, and with the books that you're writing for children, that's going to have a very positive effect on them now and in the future.
Well, and let's talk about children, because after 9 years of being married and delaying reproduction, as I like to advise women to do, my parents and my in-laws had given up on having kids. Like, they just thought, we're not going to do it. So then I got out of the military and we came back to California, and that's when we decided to start a family. So I do want to acknowledge my kids, and I do want to make them part of this conversation. So let me show you. This picture was taken at the Veterans Day Parade in San Jose. So here you see the red convertible. They invited me for Veterans Day. So I had this nice place of honor, and I'm wearing my hat. And we see my oldest daughter, Milagro, who's here. She's blind and hearing impaired. And she's just a fabulously happy kid and literate and wonderful. And then here's my second child, Katomi, and she's now 12. And then my little boy, Kiyoshi, who's now 10. So this is a really beautiful moment in a Veterans Day parade where I was honored for my service.
Yes.
And I made my kids part of this. The person missing here who's marching in front of the car with the color guard is my husband. They recruited him to carry a flag.
Okay.
So he's not in the picture, but Genro's in the parade as well. And my son, when he saw me in my flight suit, which I also have here, imagine a 3.5-year-old boy walking in and seeing his mom wearing this. So it was the night before Veterans Day. I think it might have been before that picture I just showed you. And he came in, and I was wearing the uniform because I was scheduled to go to his preschool the very next morning for Veterans Day.
Okay.
The teachers had invited us to come in. So he comes in and starts pulling off the patches. They make a cool sound. See? So imagine my son having fun doing that and asking all these questions. What is it? What does it mean? What is that? I'm a captain, like the captain of a ship. And so we had this crazy little conversation before bedtime. First time he saw me in this. And as he was going to bed and he leaves the room, he says, "I love you, Captain Mama." And I just, again, as a creative person, as a writer, I just sat there like, what did he just say? Captain Mama? Did he just invent a character? So I stayed up all night. I think it was like 4:30 in the morning when I realized what time it was. And I had written the first draft of what became my first book. And it was exactly this conversation, and I'll show you the book. Okay. It's simply called Good Night, Captain Mama. Buenas noches, Capitán Mama. And you can see the little boy is modeled after my son. And I named the character Marco, who is my brother in the Navy. So I'm actually honoring my brother's service as well. And it simply starts out with the little boy getting ready for bed and seeing Mama in the uniform. And then from there we go on and answer his questions about what she's wearing and what it means. And then what people love about this, what parents love and teachers love, is at the very end, she is going off to fly. And so we switch the gender role models here. I'm going to go fly. Dad's here to keep you safe while I'm gone, and I'll be here in the morning when you wake up. So this was directly inspired by me becoming a mother.
So nice.
But again, I delayed that because I wanted to keep flying first and then have the children second. And so now, like you said, it's about inspiring kids. And so I'm doing an entire series that's based on the adventures that I had as an aviator. And I'm doing it in English and Spanish because Spanish was my first language. This is our new one. Captain Mama Surprise, La Sorpresa de Capitán Mama. And so now we take the children out to the plane. And so we teach children, whether they speak Spanish first or English first, about the wonder of aerial refueling that I got to do. And we meet the very multicultural crew. And the crew is headed by a woman right here. And I want to take a moment and tell you about her because she is modeled after somebody that we lost. We call her Captain Castro, the pilot in the left seat. And all of these people are modeled after real aircrew members. But 3 weeks before we published this book, Shell 77, who was stationed at Fairchild Air Force Base, which is where I was stationed, they were part of the 93rd Refueling Squadron, which is the squadron that I was assigned to. They were flying out of Manus Transit Center in over supporting Afghanistan. And on takeoff, Shell 77's airplane effectively broke apart. And the crew perished, pretty much. KC-135 had not crashed or been destroyed since 1999. So this is a very, very safe airplane. But in 2013, we lost Shell 77. So the first book is actually dedicated to that crew right here. Captain Mark Tyler Voss, whose parents are in San Antonio, and I met them. And then Captain Victoria Pinckney, a true Captain Mama. She's the one that's inspired the character I just showed you. And then Tech Sergeant Trey Mackey. So that's a crew that we lost. Now, I didn't know them personally because they were assigned there years after I'd been gone, but they were from my squadron, from my base. And so right before we went to print, I said, okay, we have to honor this crew somehow, especially because Victoria, Tori, had just had a baby, and she had just come back to active duty. And so baby Gabriel was 5 months old when she died. So I had to dedicate the book to the crew. And then the second book we've dedicated to all the children who lost parents in service. Because this is April month of the military child, and we're recording this interview right now. And so we're honoring the military children, military connected children whose parents are serving, because we cannot even imagine some of the sacrifices that they're asked to make. And every time I come to Lemoore and other places, I'm hearing a story from a child whose parent has died. So we actually take the time in the children's books to acknowledge the service. Really, it is a service of the children that they unknowingly signed up for. So I do what I can to tell my story, to inspire kids towards higher education and to technical careers, and if they want to serve, all of it. But I know that you can't be what you can't see. So the reason that I speak and the reason that I write is because I recognize that my service and the whole miracle that became my life because of my high school counselor's husband. So this whole series of miracles. And I just really feel compelled to be visible and to put that out in the world as a speaker and as an author so that more kids can go, I didn't know that was an opportunity here. And who knows where those opportunities will take them, but I want them to at least know. Because I made it all the way through to high school.
Exactly.
And I didn't know. So now that I can stand in elementary school and have kids' eyes get really big, like, wow, they'll give you money to go to college. You can get paid to fly airplanes. It's just like, wow. So, yeah, that's really what I feel my next mission is. My military service is over, but now I get to share my service through award-winning bilingual literature with children all over the world. And so I think that's a pretty amazing blessing.
It is. I agree. Future generations will see this interview. What would you like them to know? What's the single thing that you'd like them to know or stand up?
It's what I say when I say, why are we publishing these books? Here's the reason. Women have always served this nation. Women have put on uniforms and served even when we had to pretend that we were men back in the Civil War. And future generations hopefully are not going to be living under a stifling patriarchy still. And women need to stop accepting the rules as written by men. So I hope when this is seen in the future that we can go, what is that lady talking about? Of course women are totally equal like our society. I hope so, because right now it's just not that way. And so what I really want people to take away, maybe I should look right at the camera and say it, is women have always served, mommies have always served, Latinas have always served in uniform. And if you learn anything at all in this interview is how proud I am of that opportunity as a Latina and as a woman and now as a mom to have had that opportunity. But it is something that women should consider doing, and that dads should not dissuade their daughters from doing, and that moms should encourage the girls to serve, and that women really can do anything. Even now in 2017, we've got women flying the Blue Angels. We've got women flying the Air Force Thunderbirds, high-speed supersonic aerial demonstration teams. They're commanding entire squadrons of fighters that I was not even allowed to be in. And it only took 20 years. From the day I got denied my F-15 Strike Eagle, it only took 20 years from that day for a woman to command an entire squadron of that same airplane. Her name is Colonel Nicole Malachowski. She's our first Thunderbird pilot born a woman. So future generations appreciate that I'm but one of many, many, many women and mothers and Latinas who have served this nation, and that I hope more women continue to do so. And I would hope, right now the Air Force is 20% women. I would like to see that be 55% at some point. Because certainly we are needed, and certainly, in the future we'll be more needed, and that women should just understand what an incredible opportunity for leadership and for technical expertise and responsibility you get when you're literally like 21 years old as an officer. It's pretty awesome. So I hope they take all that away, and the pride that I had in serving.
Well, Mrs. Graciela Sato, I want to thank you so much for taking the time for this interview. And above all, we want to thank you for your service to this country.
Thank you. It's been a privilege on both counts.